So now we go from the first quarter to the second quarter in the first half of the tribulation. So that'd be the second 21-month period that we enter into, the second quarter. And that's just, I use those as a way of kind of measuring how far we're going into tribulation. But what I'm about to describe, I believe, is in the correct order how things transpire in the latter half of the first half of tribulation, known as the second quarter. So I do want to touch on, though, as we get into this, the religious nature gripping the world at the time, or at this time. So just like in Europe and throughout the world, we have religion coming back big. And we got a lot of good religious people. There's some bad religious people, but mostly good. And just like we have in the non-Jewish world, in the Jewish world, we also have religion coming back big. But, just because we have religion in various parts of the world, whether it be in Israel or in Europe or even in America, it doesn't mean it's a monolithic group, right? So you're going to have people that are religious. You're going to have people that are atheistic. You're going to have people that are, pagans even, They worship other gods, So what you have here, especially in Israel, I just want you to see, is that there's actually a lot of Jews in Israel that, they're there in Israel not because they want to be part of the religious way of life, the Jewish religious way of life. They're just in Israel because they want to be amongst their friends and brothers, right? Other Jews. They want to be in the majority. They really are secular. They don't believe in any God. And so, and really, a long time ago, the Jewish state was founded by a lot of secular Jews. It wasn't that many religious Jews that went there. But now, what we're going to see in Israel during this time period, in the latter half of the first part of tribulation, is, the Jewish temple, the sacrifices are resumed. And as was mentioned earlier, in Israel, the sacrifices were stopped when this temple was destroyed in 70 AD by Rome and her legions. And, the temple is the center of civic and religious life in Israel, at least it was in the past, and it will be again in the future. And so with the rebuilding of the temple, they're going to resume with their animal sacrifices, which must be made at a federal level. These aren't just these aren't just sacrifices for one or two people. These are sacrifices for the whole nation. These are they're supposed to cover the sins of the whole nation. At least that's what these Jewish religious people think. And so, but I just want you to know that it's not a monolithic group in Israel. There are secular Jews. Just like in Europe, you might have a lot of religious people, you'll have Christians, but you also have atheists and people that just don't believe in God. Or they even have pagans. They worship the Norse gods, who knows. So, this is just the case here even in Israel. So it's not a monolithic group. So even though we got a temple going here and we got the sacrifices and we have a lot of religious Jews here, we just still have a lot of atheistic or secular Jews who don't want any part of Jewish religious life. So just wanted to let you know on that. And so as time goes on in the second quarter, the Bible says that this king that eventually will rise to power amongst the 10 kings, well, he changes the times and the laws. He's really making his presence felt, and it's going to be his way or the highway. The question is, just like when we saw with Hitler in Germany during before and after or during World War II, who is using whom here, right? In Germany in World War II, or before World War II, a lot of industrialists wanted Hitler to come to power. And they thought they could use Hitler to their own ends. And but Hitler, in his own mind, was using them for his own ends. So who was using whom is the question. And so this is what we see here with this king, the king of the West. Is he using the 10 kings for his own agenda, or the 10 kings using him for their own agenda? Well, in the end, we're going to find out that the king of the West prevails over them, ultimately. But, maybe that's what they want. They're all in agreement on that. So we shall see how that works here. So what happens is, as time goes on in the second quarter, in order to make his move, ultimately he does want to be a god, if you will. And this is where the worship of the god, or the worship of men as gods, as it was under Caesar, will be revived. And this is going to happen in the future. But see, there's a big problem here. We have a little thing called the church that's standing in the way. And if you know anything about European history, you do see a battle between the kings, the German kings of Europe, over the popes in the south, in Italy, over who should reign supreme, whether it be the king or the priests. And so you had this big battle, and at some point you even had, amazingly, the Pope had his own armed forces, the papal forces. And these are men that actually defended the Pope with military arms. And this is all during the medieval ages in Europe. So what we see here, amazingly, in order for the king of the West to become truly what he wants to be, which is God, he must eliminate all opposition. And this is the quarter that he does it in. And so, interestingly enough, in the Bible, the religious order amongst the 10 kings is known as the harlot. Now, the harlot apparently is in the way, if you will. And just like old European history, where the Catholic Church opposed certain German kings, well, in a way, this is kind of a revival of that. And so in the Bible, in Revelation, God says, or God has shown, that he allows the 10 kings to be able to destroy the harlot. And it says in Revelation, I believe Revelation 17, that you will note that the God allows them, or gives them free rein to destroy the harlot. And so this is what happens. The first move that is made to make the king of the West imperial, and even more than just imperial, but godlike, is to attack the harlot. So this is what we have here. We have the 10 kings. They give their power, it says, to the Antichrist for 1 hour. And the Antichrist then orders them to take out the harlot. And this is a huge political, religious move, really. And the harlot is destroyed by the 10 kings. And it says in Revelation 17 that the harlot is destroyed by fire. So some have surmised that the Vatican will be destroyed by nuclear detonations. Don't know. But if we have a history of nuclear warfare going on, a very short history of it, very recent history of it, would we be surprised that for a political brinkmanship of the Antichrist, that they would resort to nuclear weapons to destroy a religious order, that would not be surprising at all. And that's what they do. And it's not just the Vatican they destroy, right? All throughout Europe, wherever the church is, all these old institutions of the church age, the 10 kings and their armies destroy those churches. And so anybody that's a religious person that belongs to these churches, if you oppose that, you will be killed. And but for the vast majority of the saints, or shall I say the small minority of the saints, they avoid that demise, at least for the moment. But now they have no political or religious representation, if you will, in court, or even in the court of the king, if you will. So they're really bereft of any, the saints are bereft of any protection whatsoever, and now things are really getting serious. The 10 kings prevail over the harlot, as it states in Revelation 17. But something else happens. In Daniel, in reference to the harlot, he records that 3 kings are also destroyed by the king of the west. Now, originally I thought, well, maybe it's one of the 3 kings of the 10 that go against the harlot. But, there is a grouping of nations in Eastern Europe called the Visegrad group. It looks like Visegrad, but it's Visegrad. And, these are really hardcore Catholic countries that support the Vatican. And they really want a Catholic Europe to return. And so I wonder, and I don't know this for sure, but is it possible, just like the popes had their own military forces to protect the Vatican in the past, is there a secret protocol by this grouping of East European nations called the Visegrad group to protect the Vatican? And interestingly enough, the Visegrad group is made up of, 4 nations, but one nation is divided in 2, and that would be the nation of Czechoslovakia. It's now the Czech state and Slovakia by itself, and Poland and Hungary. These are the 4 nations that make up the Visegrad group. But do they have a secret protocol? Will they come to the aid of the Vatican? Well, think about how, in the past that this would be the case. Somebody will defend the Vatican. Somebody has an interest in defending the Pope. And if the Pope and the Vatican are the object of the Antichrist's machinations, I suspect somebody will come to their aid. Well, it says 3 kings are deposed, or defeated, even by the Antichrist. So, but it's not any of these original 10 kings, because we find these 10 kings will eventually end up in Jerusalem fighting the return of Jesus Christ. So perhaps these other 3 kings are not part of the 10. That's what I'm thinking. But so at any rate, I could totally see this happening within months in Europe as the Antichrist consolidates his power. And the question is, are the 10 using him, or is he using the 10? I suppose it really just doesn't matter in the final analysis, because in the end, he is victorious.